Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are, folks. Happy Monday. We are back with the lore of Elden Ring by VaatiVidya reaction videos. And today, it's my understanding many of you are excited to no longer be telling me how many days in the comments you've been asking me for this one. The lore of Elden Ring is blasphemous. Now, folks, I have a couple things going into this video I've been excited about. This is the Rykard video, at least judging by the thing in front of us. Now, a couple things that we're going to look into in this video. Question one, how did Rykard get to this place? Because Ranni and Radahn are Rykard's siblings under Rennala or Rellana. I will never get those two right. Sue me. Don't sue me. I don't need that in my life. It's an expression. Is that an expression across the world, or is that just a Western, like, U.S. thing? Because very litigious. That is not important. Folks, I'm going to drink my coffee. Day like 19 of asking for a coffee sponsor. We'll get there, folks. Don't worry about it. Better be good coffee, though. Where was I? Children. Yes. Radagon and Rennala / Rellana had Radahn, Ranni, and Rykard. And I have been curious for so long about how Rykard, like, fell so far. I mean, Ranni and Radahn both demonstrated remarkable aptitudes and their own, individualized interests, and Rykard has gone way overboard. So question one is, how did Rykard get to where he is? Question two is, just understanding more of what Rykard is responsible for, his role in the Volcano Manor, and that I know will be uncovered in this, but I didn't do the Volcano Manor quest line because it would... As the character choice that I made was that I wasn't a douche, so I didn't do it. Also, Patches can bite me. He's the worst. And I would have burned him in Melina's place had that been an option. And then lastly, we're going to count the number of times that someone says, "Together!" And if the answer is not many, I'm going to be disappointed in Vaati, but don't you worry. I will say it, and you can all shout along together with me. Don't worry about it if people look at you weird. You're watching my videos. Odds are people already look at you weird. That's kind of my my audience. You're weirdos. But you're fun weirdos. All right, folks. Without any further ado, let us dive in. The Elden Ring lore is blasphemous.
And it has been... The god of Mount Gelmir is a serpent, and it has been there for a long time. Long before the age of the Erdtree, in an era we know little about, there was an ancient, immortal serpent deity. There for a long time. Long before the age of the Erdtree, in an era we know little about, there was an ancient, immortal serpent deity on Mount Gelmir, and a forgotten religion that venerated it. We learn this from the serpent god's curved sword, which was a tool used to offer up sacrifices, fashioned in the image of the ancient serpent deity. The serpent takes. The serpent is greed. It always has been, ever since Dark Souls, where the serpent was a symbol.
What the f...
It always has been, ever since Dark Souls, where...
That's not a snake, dude! You can't give a snake human teeth! Oh, that is not right. Oh.
The serpent was a symbol of avarice.
Oh.
So, in the ancient age of Elden Ring, the serpent consumed its sacrifices and grew vast.
I don't think I'm going to play
But there were
Dark Souls
those who would not stand for it. They brandished the Serpent Hunter, a weapon that is both greatsword and spear, thought to have been used to hunt an immortal great serpent in the distant past. It manifests a blade of light when facing such a creature. So it is that we can speculate that the serpent deity was defeated, but the serpent never dies, and so it would return one day to feast upon a demigod who had ventured deep into Mount Gelmir, seeking power. This is a video about the blasphemy of Praetor Rykard, the demigod child of Radagon and Rennala, who would one day be consumed by the immortal serpent.
Together. I hope that's one of the chapter titles. I hope that's one of the chapter titles. Chapter 1.
Here, at the Church of Vows in Liurnia, the House of the Erdtree and the Moon were joined. Radagon, champion of gold, and Renala, Queen of Caria, were wedded. This ended a war between Leonia and Leyndell. Eventually, Radagon would abandon Renala, but not before siring 3 children with her. These children were Rani, Radahn, and Rykard. All 3 were born with Radagon's red hair and Renala's aptitude for magic.
I keep forgetting that Rani is not in her human form. So I was like, what do you mean red hair? Have you seen her? She's blue. And then I'm like, oh, that's the puppet she put her soul into after. I've been paying attention, I promise.
And all 3 officially became demigod stepchildren when Radagon divorced their mother and married the goddess Marika.
Folks, you cannot call Rani, Radahn, and Rykard's stepchildren with George R. R. Martin's writing and not immediately, I cannot be the only one, and you can interpret this however you want. I'm relatively shameless. But you cannot tell me half of you did not immediately think of the hub. Oh, stepsister. Ronnie got stuck in the Great Lift again.
Instead. In truth, however, Renala's children were never demigod step-children. They were demigod children, full stop. That's because, secretly, Radagon is Marika. Thus, Rani, Radahn, and Rykard always were born of a god.
Okay, that distinction actually I wasn't thinking about. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So it's because of the time Radagon and Marika's status wasn't known, so they were perceived to be just, stepchildren of demigod as opposed to legitimately they're clearly just demigods. Okay. That makes sense.
Even though they might not have known it. Their father remarrying with a god conferred some benefits, it seems. For one, Radagon's children would be honored enough to sit equally aside their step-siblings in Leyndell. This is shown during Morgoth's cutscene. The way these thrones are arranged, it's almost as if there was once a council here of sorts. Now,
I've wondered about there being a council of sorts here for a long time because we've always and only ever seen post-fracture. Thank you for waiting patiently. And thank you for the Gazoontites. Unless you didn't say Gazoontite, bless you, or something equivalent, in which case, you're a jerkface.
Of course, there is no council, and Morgoth spits out their names as he considers all of the demigods to be traitors to the positions of authority they once held.
General Radahn. Praetor Rykard.
I'm going to be honest. I one-shot Morgoth. I don't remember this intro. Sometimes you watch it a second time. General Radahn Rykard. Okay, so he's spitting out the name. I need to rewatch this.
Luna Princess Rani.
Rykard having the title of Praetor in the days where he sat this throne is an extremely interesting point of discussion. Praetor is a word that has its origins in the city of ancient Rome, where a praetor was a sort of magistrate, someone who exercised authority from a courthouse and its collection of judges. By some Roman accounts, praetors were not just involved with the law, but were also involved with commanding armies and conducting war, though it might be a stretch to say that Rykard had that much authority. Instead, I think it's safer to assume that Rykard's praetorship was busied with discovering the truth and administering justice by any means necessary.
Yeah,
and
I got that
I
part.
feel safe leveling this characterization at him because of Gideon.
Praetor Rykard is the lord of the Volcano Manor on Mount Gelmir. He is a ruthless justiciar who commands a company of inquisitors.
So Rykard wasn't just a praetor and a justiciar, he was also Lord of the Volcano Manor, a structure built into the very side of the volcano to the west of Altus.
One of the things I think about historically when I think about castles, Volcano Manor, is just how many places are built out of ego instead of defensiveness. Because, I welcome any and all scientific inquiry on this. Building into a cliff seems like a horrible life choice. Like, I feel like you're going to lose half your castle to a minor tremor. Oh, by the way, you built it into a volcano. What could possibly go wrong? Like, just once, I want to see a villain's castle blow up because of their monumental stupidity and disrespect for Mother Earth. Just, you know, the sheer awesome power of the Earth feels like shaking. It's not really a rant. I've just been always curious about that because it seems really cool to build things like that, but then you look at them, you're like, that actually would not survive contact. Like, you know, erosion is a real problem, right? Like, even over the course of 100 years, I have watched climbing mountains that I enjoy erode, and Volcano Manor can afford to erode like 2 inches before that whole thing goes into the volcano. It's doomed. And I know, but there's magic and giant snakes. Why are you worried about erosion? Because physics doesn't just stop because of giant snakes. I'm gonna get that as a bumper sticker. That'd be the worst bumper sticker of all time.
Plateau. It was to here, I believe, that Leyndell outsourced much of their justice.
So you see all these people in the cages. You ever think that they went like John Oliver, Life of Brian, you know, like always look on the bright side? You ever think they just kind of looked at each other and went, together? And then they all started laughing and they're like, we're going to die in here. And someone's like, yeah, but we're going to do it together. That'd be some epic gallows humor. Hold up. Another fun fact, folks, while I'm paying attention here. This cage is floating. This one is floating. It is not attached. That is literally not attached. They thought we wouldn't notice. They thought nobody would pause here to make together jokes, but here we are.
And I think
it's just not attached. It's not falling.
that theory,
that's an error. Smoothest Mango has caught a graphical mistake. But so now this forces me to ask. So this is not a cinematic. This is Vaati and whoever does the filmography panning through the view. So presumably this is actually the models in the game, which then begs the question if this is something that was caused as a distortion by what Vaati's viewing through, or if the game itself has one of these unchained, which now I'm real curious about. Huh. Folks, I don't care about the lore anymore. I want to get to the bottom of this. Like next to my face here. Let me... There, right there. Look at that. Look at that. That chain is not... Oh, my finger's gone! Oh, it's back. It's back. Okay, don't worry, folks. But, like, I want to figure out what's going on there. I want to... Like, why hold on. Like, I can hold it together. Okay, that was actually pretty heavy, folks. I need to work out my fingers more. I don't remember what we were talking about, but we're moving. Oh, coffee.
will make more sense as we go. So let's investigate the manor and try to learn more about Rykard as he was before the Shattering, when we think he still served Leyndell. To arrive at the manor, one commonly first receives an invitation.
I hereby invite you to the Volcano Manor. Take my hand.
Don't take her hand. Dude, that's some Hansel and Gretel Witch in the Woods shit. She's gonna stuff you into an oven.
And have audience with my mistress.
Upon arrival, you're met with a well-maintained grandeur not common to Elden Ring's other castles. Clearly, first impressions are important here. You make your way in, head up to the banquet hall, and before long, you're invaded by the spectre of one of Rykard's most loyal inquisitors. This is Inquisitor Giza, and his lore reveals just how ruthless Rykard's inquisitions were. His weapon of choice is an iron wheel lined with flesh-flaying blades that cause severe pain and blood loss. It's a device of torture that kind of evokes the torture wheels of antiquity, an intimidating tool that was likely very effective at getting Giza's victims to tell the truth. And if you're asking what truth, Well, I imagine Leyndell would have had a lot of truths that it would like to extract from its populace, for it sees many things as sins. For example, if you were Omen, you were to be hunted or sent to the shunning grounds. If you were a prophet who saw the Erdtree burn in your visions, then you could be exiled with a wheel bolted to your neck. If you were suspected of conspiring with the frenzied flame, you could get your entire clan entombed beneath the earth for eternity. So yeah, the Golden Order isn't exactly flexible. And sure, Miriel tells us that heresy can be conjoined with order, but historically that was only true if your heresy was such a threat to the Erdtree that it couldn't be overcome any other way. Aside from Giza's signature wheel, a more common weapon of the Inquisitors was the Inquisitor's girandole.
This is the Trident made fun of the other day for the candles. If Lumiere was a weapon.
Which has numerous spikes that pierce the flesh, then singe the wounds with flame. Basically, it creates a wound, then immediately cauterizes it so that the torture can continue for longer. The smell of burnt blood induces despair in the victim, and this candlestick, conceived by a thorough mind, was explicitly used on nobles.
Fun fact, the smell of burnt blood is demoralizing. The more you know.
Behind the curtain at the Volcano Manor. Now, the word noble in Elden Ring doesn't really relate to any one faction. There are Godskin nobles, Sanguine nobles, and many others besides. That said, the most common nobles are those from the capital, who, according to the old aristocrat Cal, are undead wanderers who abandoned their birthplace after the Shattering. Of all the nobles in Elden Ring that the Inquisitor's girandole would have been used on, I believe it...
I'm sorry. What is this footage?
The Inquisitor's...
What is this footage where this guy's just up against the wall and he's just stabbing him repeatedly? This is like the most cooperative victim of all time.
Girandole would have been used on, I believe it was these citizens of Leyndell. So for the last few minutes, I've made it pretty obvious that I believe Rykard was spiriting away nobles from Leyndell to torture at the Volcano Manor on behalf of Leyndell. I believe this happened during his tenure at Leyndell as Praetor, not after the Shattering when he abandoned the capital. But is there actually any explicit evidence of Rykard controlling the Volcano Manor while he was still serving Leyndell before the Shattering? Well, yes, but it's mostly circumstantial evidence. Here's a short list. First, it's implied from Morgoth's dialogue, at least, that Rykard was a Praetor while he had a throne in Leyndell. So there's that. Next, we know Rykard's Inquisitors tortured nobles with a candlestick weapon that looks very much inspired by the fire of Mount Gelmir, so I think that's another piece of evidence that links the Volcano Manor with his praetorship.
I mean, it definitely links it, but like you said, circumstantial. So for those who don't know, circumstantial evidence basically means like, okay, that plausibly connects them, but it doesn't prove anything. Now, you could have a mountain of circumstantial evidence to be like, look, this really seems connected. And still, you could still argue both ways and say, like, yes, it's like there's a lot of coincidences here, sure, but it's not enough. And a properly working legal system, you know, can make short work of just circumstantial evidence. So an example of direct evidence we'd be looking for here is like an item explicitly saying those two things that existed at the same time. Now, that all being said, I don't think the circumstantial evidence matters the way we're approaching it here. This idea that, well, can we prove the two are connected? I think the only thing that matters is understanding Rykard as a person, like, so the detail in his background. We know he was part of this Inquisition, and using Volcano Manor as a settling ground for this, so to speak, is literally what has been done throughout history. Like, it's even being done in modern U.S. politics with immigration and customs enforcement now by, you know, deporting people to prisons in El Salvador. And like, and I'm not getting political with it. It's just like that is what is done in despotism, is you bring them somewhere where the laws no longer apply. They're out of public visage. So I mean, to me, I don't see any, like, especially with what we have seen is happening at Volcano Manor. Those people aren't coming from Volcano Manor. Now, there were also some Gen 2 Albinarics in Volcano Manor, so what's being done there, I don't know, because they're not in Lendel. That could be from Leoria. But absolutely, he's using his role to outsource. It's just, I feel like, to me, it's more a question of economics. It's like, well, there's nowhere else to get those people. You're not getting them from Volcano Manor. He's already killed everyone there.
In Lendel. Then there's Rykard's Gelmir Knights, who have a crest of red feathers that symbolize Rykard's pedigree as Lord Radagon's son. There's a veneration here of Radagon of the Golden Order, and the Knights were explicitly loyal to Praetor Rykard before he became the blasphemous Lord Rykard, so I think this is another small piece of evidence that suggests the Volcano Manor at Mount Gelmir was kind of a vassal state to Lendel. But admittedly, none of this is conclusive. However, we haven't yet discussed the official's attire. The official's attire is a piece of clothing we loot in an office of Lendel. When worn, you realize it's a near-perfect match for the attire that Giza wears, and it also matches the attire of this nameless figure in a portrait that hangs over the banquet hall that Giza invades. Yet again, we have a link, now between the officials of Lendel and the Inquisitors of the Manor. So who is this portraited figure? Why is Giza wearing a similar set? And why is Giza's attire found in Lendel? The lore of the official's attire reads, grubby blue robe, worn by magisterial officials to carry out their grim tasks, surveillance, executions, gruesome rituals. The darkest duties drive the wheels of mankind. To loot this item, we have to access a lift to the east of Lendel. Here, right on the border of these forbidden lands, and halfway up the elevator, there's a hidden path that leads towards a small
that's why
office.
I missed this.
And
I never paid
that's
attention
where we
in
find
elevators.
the body of one who previously wore this attire. Ahead of them is the small room, one that's quite well furnished, and it's here presumably that this official would have furtively administered their dark duties, which again included surveillance, executions, and gruesome rituals. Given the location, these tasks would have been done in the service of Lendel, you'd think. Incidentally, this is also where we loot the Blade of Calling, the same dagger that Melina wields, which was given to one who set out on a journey to fulfill her duty long ago. Perhaps the implication here is that this hidden office of Lendel was involved with Melina's own grim storyline, but that's probably the topic for another video. The big deal here is that Inquisitor Giza also wears the official's attire, which links him, an Inquisitor of Rykard, to the magisterial officials, just like this one, who drive the wheels of mankind behind the scenes in Lendel with their surveillance, executions, and rituals. Thus, as befits a Praetor, I think it's fair to assume that Rykard and his Inquisition really were involved with the governance of Lendel on a deeper level. But the shadow cast by these officials doesn't just cover Lendel and the Volcano Manor. I think the origins of their attire and their order can actually be traced to the Shaded Castle and the Marai, who occupy a nearby township. The reason I speculate this is that Giza isn't just wearing the official's chest piece. In fact, every other slot is filled with the blood-soaked set instead. These are nothing more than tightly wound bandages soaked through with blood, which hide the ghastly, festering body beneath. The clear implication here is that Inquisitor Giza is very, very sick. Indeed, a reveal of his face by Zully the Witch shows his scars, and
I mean, those scars don't reveal anything nearly enough in terms of sickness. Though I will say, someone pulling up this level of background, this continues to be nuts to me that this is all in the game.
a mere stone's throw away is the Shaded Castle, which explains it all. The Castellans of the Shaded Castle are the Mirai family, who have this long, storied history. We learn about it from the Mirai Mask, which lets us know that these Castellans of the Shaded Castle have also served as executioners for generations. This mask is customarily worn by the head of House Mirai. Similar to the blood-soaked wraps that Giza wears, I think it's a convenient way to hide the festering skin beneath, as it's well known that the sons of House Mirai are all sickly born. We learn this from the Mirai robe, which is attire that is almost identical to the officials' attire. The only difference is that it has this black mantle across the shoulders, and the Mirai robe, combined with the mask, also looks strikingly similar to this portrait in the Volcano Manor where Inquisitor Giza invaded you. There's just so much overlap here. But to summarize, House Mirai are lords of the Shaded Castle, where they are sickly born and have served as executioners. The attire of their lords is almost identical to the attire of the officials who served Leyndell, who were also...
They do so much good work with the designs in this game. I refuse to believe that's coincidence. So as far as circumstantial evidence goes, I would say that is very, very compelling. Though, again, I was already on board with the fact that Rykard was clearly doing this. Like, if this was a court of law, yes, I would need to state my case very adequately. But from what we've seen of the game, it's like, no. Like default setting is dude is evil. Like, that's literally everyone in this game is evil. So just imagine the most villainous thing they could be doing. I reached that conclusion 2 seconds into meeting Rykard. But I appreciate Vaati's professionalism in trying to prove it instead of just going, dude seems sus. So, Vaati, take it away.
Involved in executions, as well as surveillance and gruesome rituals. Therefore, I think it's fair to assume that...
It kind of looks like a pizza cutter, and that makes me want pizza tonight. What's tonight? Today's Monday. All right. Oh, and I don't get pizza night on Thursdays anymore. I don't know if I told you all that. So I have pizza night every Thursday. Maybe actually, you know what? Maybe I told you that Friday morning. I'm still pretty gutted about it, though. It's kind of sad.
House Mirai aided Leyndell in these dark capacities. And since one of Praetor Rykard's Inquisitors also wears the Leyndell officials set and is sick with blood-soaked manchettes and a portrait nearby that looks like a Mirai noble, I also think it's fair to assume that this Inquisitor, and maybe others, were not only loyal to Leyndell, but originally hailed from the Shaded Castle as well. And
now the Shaded Castle... So the scope of this game leaves things like this often in mystery. But if you think about Game of Thrones, how many castles and, Castellans and lords are vassals of other great houses. So they're called great houses because many of the other houses are beholden to them due to size, economics, military prowess, take your pick. And so the Shaded Castle here, very likely a minor house and vassals of Rykard and the Volcano Manor, which is why they serve them so regularly. Them having their own castle doesn't make them any less beholden to someone else. The same way Rykard was beholden to the Golden Order in Leyndell. And so you end up with these, these chains of motives and loyalties. So I would suspect that this is, the Shaded Castle is simply a vassalship to Volcano Manor and Rykard, which would explain, again, it makes sense to me.
of them would have been loyal to Rykard, who was a Praetor and a Justicia, someone who would have been involved in magisterial and punitive duties on behalf of his Queen Mother and Lord Father in Leyndell. I love the picture that this all paints, and I love how geographically that story plays out. The Shaded Castle is a part of Altus Plateau after all, so of course the Mirai family would be assimilated by the local superpower and become a part of the Leyndell nobility as the Age of the Erdtree began. Indeed, the attire of the Mirai and the officials also closely matched that of the consort's robe and the upper class robe, revealing the higher status of these folk. So we think these Leyndell officials were tasked with surveilling the rest of the noble populace, and I like to imagine that they invited many nobles, particularly ones they were investigating, to the Volcano Manor to dine or die, perhaps with the same sort of letters that we receive. Upon arrival, the nobles are received by the proprietress of the house, and they marvel at the drawing room, a place that's designed to receive and entertain guests. There's a huge round table here, a gorgeous dining room upstairs, a living room to the side, and even smaller, more intimate rooms that guests can retire to. However, a couple of these rooms hide a secret, and it's that they have illusory walls.
I thought the secret was going to be the corpse in the corner, but no, we're more concerned about illusions that could have loot. Priorities.
That lead to a dungeon and a world of torture and pain.
I remember
For
that.
the Volcano Manor is
Forgot.
merely
I
a facade,
remember, but had
and
forgotten.
these rooms likely exist for the express purpose of spiriting nobles away for interrogation. So we've established that Rykard's Inquisition was deeply involved in surveillance, questioning, and justice, and because of this, you'd think Rykard would have been exposed to the most cardinal sins of the populace. So I wonder, is it possible that these blasphemous ideas started to get through to him? Did Rykard spy an element of truth in their words? There is a portrait of the Erdtree burning hanging in Volcano Manor, so I wonder, for example, if he started to believe in the visions that the prophets kept on having about the Erdtree on fire. If we imagine that Rykard was exposed to all of these blasphemies, perhaps it's not so ironic to think that this Justicia would eventually become the most blasphemous of them all. What's more, the current Elden Lord of Leyndell, Radagon, had abandoned Rykard's mother and left her a broken woman. Now I'm just speculating here, but perhaps this betrayal to marry Marika in Leyndell didn't sit right with Renala's own children. Luckily for Rykard, another of his siblings was harboring resentment towards the Golden Order, and she planned to do something about it. According to Roger, Rani orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives, a plot that allegedly was the catalyst for the shattering of the Elden Ring, since it resulted in the death of a demigod. To orchestrate something is to plan or coordinate all of the elements, and Rani wasn't acting alone. She had help. First and foremost, there was the assistance of the Black Knife Assassins, who used black knives infused with death to murder Godwyn the Golden. Then she might have had help in the forging of the Rune of Death into knives, which we speculate could have required Iji, a blacksmith. Then there's the matter of the theft of the Rune of Death itself, which Rani herself takes credit for. But one thing I feel that it's easy to miss is that Rykard might have helped with her plot as well. The Blasphemous Claw is an item we receive from one of Rykard's recusants, and it reads,
Is this the recusant in the Halig tree? I do think I remember this recusant, though, whether it's the Halig tree or Faramazula.
slab of rock engraved with traces of the Rune of Death can deflect the power of the Black Blade. On the night of the dire plot, Rani rewarded Praetor Rykard with these traces. Should the coming trespass one day transpire, they would serve as a last resort foil, allowing Rykard to challenge the Black Blade, the Black Beast of destined death. So it is that we learn Rani rewarded her brother at the end of her plot to murder Godwyn the Golden. The word reward seems to imply that Rykard had some part in all of this, right? And that maybe he did something worthy of recompense. So what do we think that Rykard could have conceivably done to help?
So in Rykard's position, what he would have had access to more than anything is security within Leyndell. So as Praetor, his Justiciary, his Inquisition, like, he would have been better positioned than anyone to give Rani the intelligence on where Godwyn would be and how to get to him. And that's not actually a simple, like, it seems like, so for Rykard, that's a minor thing for him, but a huge deal for Rani. I mean, it seems like it could just be that simple, because I don't know that I've seen his trace in anywhere else in the Night of Destined Death.
With the Night of the Black Knives. One of my favorite theories comes from Loki, who brought up Rykard's magisterial duties in Leyndell, since Ranni's forces would have needed to break into the city to murder Godwyn the Golden and perhaps even to steal a fragment of the Rune of Death in the first place. It makes sense that Praetor Rykard would have been a good ally to have in this moment, since he likely had authority over law and order here. So perhaps Rykard arranged for security to be lax on the night of Black Knives. Or perhaps he gave Ranni's crew intel about the city's defenses. And if you subscribe to the idea that Rykard's praetorship involved control of the army like some of the old Roman praetors had, then that definitely would have helped as well. Of course, how Rykard earned his reward is very open to speculation, but we definitely know that he was deemed worthy of this reward, and that gives us a lot to work with. For example, it also...
So now just two notes on this. So the first is that I like, you know, hearing that follow up too, like it's exactly what I was thinking. It makes the most sense for this to be the kind of the inside man. And the kicker here is Ranni and Rykard are siblings. Like, there is no difficulty believing communication, secret communication between the two of them is possible. That's not to say, oh, Rykard's certainly capable of this. But it is very, very reasonable to believe, especially following Radagon's, abandonment of his mother, that Ranni could have persuaded him, whether knowingly or otherwise, to get her enough information to get the job done. And now, so remember though, like, especially from a manipulative perspective, Ranni is very intelligent. She is very manipulative. And I'm not judging that per se, but it is important that we recognize it. I don't have a hard time believing Ranni could have manipulated Rykard, you know, into getting, like, basically just being like, oh, you know, I've got this thing going on. I just need a little bit of information. Like, I'm just doing something goofy. Now, of course, like, unless she tells him explicitly, Rykard's going to never imagine she's stealing Destined Death and killing Godwyn. Usually when you get an inside man like this, they do not appreciate the scope of what's happening. They think it's a minor thing. This happens all the time in real life with real security. You know, a security guard will look the other way while you get another friend in who's not 21 into the bar. That happens all the time, and most security, most people in these positions of power, it's just the cost of doing business. I'm not saying, like, I'm not condoning it, but that type of corruption, which is definitionally corruption, it's usually so minor that everyone's like, look, do I want to cause a big stink about this, or do I want to take $100 in cash and let someone into the bar who was gonna get in anyway in some other way? What do I care? And so that type of thing happens a lot. And so now for Rykard, Ranni could have been like, look, I'm just upset. I just want to talk to Godwyn. And Rykard will be like, fine, I'll get you in. I'll get you in. He doesn't know he's getting in assassins. He doesn't know that Ranni's stealing Destined Death. Now, so that's version 1. Version 1 is it would not be hard for Ranni to kind of manipulate. Version 2 is Rykard is a Praetorian. He is smart. He's manages an Inquisition. He listens to secrets all day long. I don't believe version 1, though that type of situation is common. I don't believe it because I don't think Rykard is stupid enough to not know Ranni is looking for trouble. I think it far more likely that Rykard was on board with what was going to happen, and he wanted to, in the ensuing power vacuum, thought he could, grow more. Also, with the Inquisition, everything he sees at Leyndell, like, he's probably at this point so jaded in the belief that Leyndell is corrupt and needs a new order that he's going to step up his power and fix it even more. That's not hard to believe at all. The other point I want to add here that I think is really interesting is, so this item clearly says, oh, well, this will help Rykard with this. One of the greatest things from a writing perspective that I enjoy is when an innocent character in this in this potential situation, Rykard, is given a reward that says, hey, thanks for your help that night. And the innocent character goes, what? And everyone else is like, he was in on it. So again, I don't think option 1, where Rykard was tricked, is true. But if it was, him getting rewarded with this, that, with all this, like, could easily be a frame job to be like, look, Rykard, you're in it now. Nobody's going to believe you weren't in on this. You even got this reward. What do you, like, you're going to be caught red-handed if you say anything. You think that'll be a good idea? So again, I don't believe the innocent Rykard is the version that happened, but it absolutely would be hilarious. I think option 2 is far more likely. We don't have the visuals, the evidence to say Rykard was dissatisfied, but I think all the pieces are there that would have been the logical conclusion. So let's see where Vaati goes with this.
Worthy of this reward, and that gives us a lot to work with. For example, it also tells us that Ranni knew about Rykard's blasphemous intentions before the shattering. Hell, maybe merely harboring blasphemous thoughts was worthy of a reward in Ranni's eyes. And what she gave was a valuable reward, the blasphemous claw. It wards off Malekith's black blade of destined death, which posed the single greatest threat to the demigods, especially to one as blasphemous as Rykard. One thing I kind of love about Rykard is that, as blasphemous as he was, even in his later years, he still keeps a portrait of his brother Radahn hanging in the Volcano Manor. Radahn, by all accounts, was a bit of a Golden Order fanboy, with armor that symbolized Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and the red hair of Radagon, which he was keen to show off. You'd think then that this would be a painting worthy of being taken down. Hell, there's literally a painting of a burning Erdtree in the same building, and yet the portrait remains. Perhaps there was a kinship between these, the children of Rennala, that superseded their differences. What I'm trying to say is that I think Rykard really loves his
Family.
Together.
In general, though, kinships between the demigods generally went out the door when the shattering occurred, as Marika's remaining kin claimed the great runes of the shattered Elden Ring.
In Marika's own words, "Hear me, demigods. My children, beloved, make of thyselves that which ye desire. Be it a lord, be it a god, but should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices."
With words such as these, and with the power split to all the demigods with the great runes, it's clear that Marika was laying the groundwork for a greater descent, and a more pronounced shattering war. Of course, many did go to war for their demigod's unique ambition. Godric the Golden tried, and failed, to take back the capital, and he was repelled by Morgoth, the new grace-given lord of Leyndell, and many troops would have died in this battle. Radahn's Redmane Knights also clashed with Melania's Cleanrot Knights, which caused the Scarlet Bloom in Caelid, and when the war efforts were spent, many demigods retreated back to their domains to lick their wounds, essentially. Rykard, for his part, clearly doubled down on Mount Gelmir as his domain during this time, and between all of the demigod ambitions on display during the shattering, I think Rykard's would have stood out for one unique reason, and it's that he didn't want to wrest control of the Golden Order. No, he wanted to rise against the Erdtree and tear it all down instead.
The Erdtree blessed the Tarnished with grace,
I would agree.
but it was all too meager in the face of the enormity of their task. The Tarnished were forced to scavenge, squabbling for crumbs, like the Shard-bearers vying for power in the wake of the shattering. Our Lord, indignant, has refused to scurry about, fighting over what miserly scraps they allow us. If the Erdtree, and indeed the very gods, would debase us so, then we are willing to raise the banner of resistance, even if it means heresy. We at the Volcano Manor, under Lord Rykard, have sworn no rest until it is done.
Before release, Miyazaki has gone on record stating, "As for Rykard, in a way, I feel that his blasphemy represents one of the strongest wills in Elden Ring. To put it in grandiose terms, I find his determination and commitment almost enviable." So, even Miyazaki sounds pretty sold on Rykard. I imagine his troops were as well. Indeed, both descriptions within the Gelmir Knight sets mention their loyalty to Rykard.
So when you think about leaders in games like this. I think one of the things most often missing from, I'll call them villains, but let's be honest, antagonists, because villains suggests evil, whereas an antagonist is simply in the way of the main character. How many of you have seen Avengers? So Avengers, great movie. Like, don't get me wrong, like, everything has happened in the MCU after. There's been hits, there's been misses, it's become inconsistent. Whether you care about Doomsday or not, irrelevant. But the original Avengers did a lot of things really, really well. And one of the most important is, I'm sorry, spoiler alert, when Loki stabs Coulson through the back, and Coulson is lying there bleeding, knife wound through, you know, his chest, and he's got the gun on his lap, and he says, "You're going to lose." And Loki says, "Well, why is that?" And Phil says, "Because you lack conviction." Because Loki is playing at, you know, being a god. He wants to be this thing, but he doesn't know why he wants it. So he lacks the conviction, the will to see it through, because he doesn't truly understand what he wants. He's basically just throwing a tantrum, and because he's a god, that tantrum involves harming lots of people, and does ultimately allow the redemption of his character in some ways. Not necessarily forgiveness, but redemption. And so when you take this all to Rykard and you think about his character, I would agree, like, conviction is not a problem he has. And one of the most important things for people to see is, you know, for leaders or even entertainers, you know, such as myself, is that when you look at someone who you want to believe, you need to believe that they believe in something. You know, whether it's, you know, Tom Brady and the Patriots believing they're going to win the Super Bowl and you're standing behind them because of their confidence, you know, maybe so far as the arrogance at times. Whether it's, you know, looking at Olympic athletes you respect who, you know, who are just, you can see the conviction of how hard they've worked and they believe they're going to do their best. Whether they win or not, you can feel the power of their will. And when you look at video game characters like this, their conviction, their will is absolute, and to the point of Miyazaki. He has not succumbed to this fighting over the Elden Ring like everyone else to just like do what's been always been done and try to grab the pieces you can. He's saying, no, I am going to rebuild the whole damn thing. And this ties to what I said earlier about becoming jaded and saying, no. I've talked to all, I've interrogated every level of society in Lendell, and you're all fucked. You're all awful. We got to redo this whole thing. And that is, like, that ties, one of the phrases I love the most when it comes to this is, you know, stare too long into the abyss and the abyss stares back into you. And it's like, and it's true, because when you spend your whole life dealing with the horrible evils, it corrupts you. And it's one of the reasons law enforcement, remember my bachelor's degree is criminal justice, one of the reasons, you know, people worry, and it happens, police officers get jaded. And this isn't in any way to advocate or condone for, you know, the challenges within law enforcement in any way. But when you deal with it over and over and over and over again, you stop having an emotional response to it, and instead you're just like, name, yep, I got to make the report. I understand he hit you, you hit him back, then he shot. Like, look, I've done this 16,000 times. I just have to write it down. And it's like, and that's in a lot of ways we should be alarmed by that, but not because of the lack of empathy, but because of the situation created that has allowed people to develop in this way. And again, this all ties back to Rykard with this idea that he has become so jaded, so corrupted, that yes, he has incredible conviction, but incredible conviction in the hands of someone who thinks everything sucks is horrifying. It's horrifying, which is why he's willing to pursue this bond with the immortal serpent, which I'm sure we're going to see more about in the future. But it has laid all of this groundwork for this man to say, I will do whatever it takes to win. Immense conviction in, you know, refuting the existing order. And everyone with him supports this because his conviction is absolute. They've seen it as well. They've worked with him. The world is screwed up. Let's burn the whole thing to the ground. We'll follow you as far as it takes. And then it's gonna get messy. And so I expect at some point, as he pursues this relationship with the serpent, some of his people are gonna go, what the fuck? And that's why I guarantee that's why we're going to find out why there's just corpses all over his room. The Serpent Hunter's sword is in the room with him. I don't know why he didn't move it. That's a whole separate thing. But I suspect there's a mutiny of sorts when they realize, oh no, he's gone batshit crazy, which is the worst kind of crazy, objectively. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
And his lofty ambitions. These descriptions, as well as dialogue from Banal and the ex-Gelmir Knight, all mention Rykard's dignity and worth. But of course, it would all go to hell.
Fuck Patches! Seriously, a lot of you seem to like Patches. I hate everything about him.
In the end.
A fine mess. But how else could it end? When Daddy Ambition's head over heels courting Lady Blasphemy.
So this is Rykard at his height. Now let's talk about the fall.
God, that painting still horrifies me. Chapter 2. Rykard the Blasphemous. Praetor no longer.
At some point, Rykard delved deeper into the mountain.
The dwarves dug too greedily and too deep. You know what it is they found.
And what he found would change him forever. For Mount Gelmir contains truly ancient things, artifacts and religion, and a creature that history barely talks about. The most important description comes from the Serpent God's curved sword, a weapon that was formerly used to offer up sacrifices. It was a tool of a forgotten religion, once practiced on Mount Gelmir, and considering the sword's design is a serpent's jaw that consumes the vitality of enemies, we can guess who the sacrifices were being made to. This culture of sacrifice helps us to explain another ancient discovery Rykard made within Mount Gelmir: hexes. Typically in From Software games, a hex is a type of death magic, which...
Is this Source Dark Souls 2 gameplay, all hexes from ability preview? Uses 8 to 15, 24, 40 damage enemies, affinity. I suspect those are overlays. They look like pretty basic graphics. It's hard to tell. Folks, I've never played the Dark Souls game. I do plan to. I am going to need to brace myself for the graphics stepping back, which is because it's and there will be timing issues and other things. Like, it's really important when you go back and play games 20 years old that you take a deep breath and remember to appreciate the games when they were made. And that doesn't mean you go, oh, it's a great game, even though like it's clearly got a lot of these issues that have aged out. But the games where the only issue is kind of some mechanics and like graphics, and like those are the games that are perfect for a remaster because it makes them available to the new generation who kind of just can't look at them because they look so old. And I think one of the Dark Souls games got a remaster, didn't it? I got them all on like 90% off sale like last year or something. So it was like, like $10 for all three or something like that. So I was like, well, eventually I'll probably play them. Yoink. But God of War series is on my list too. And oh my God, folks, I was looking at God of War 1. Holy shit. What was that, original PlayStation? Oh man, I got to wrap my head around this. It's going to be so hard for me to get used to. This is not important to the video at all. Stop distracting me.
Often manifests as a skull flying towards enemies. In Elden Ring, this tracks as well.
Ghost flame.
The death hexes of the Deathbirds, for example, summon a horde of vengeful spirits, as does Rykard's Rancor.
Yeah, I hate
to be
those skulls.
even more
You can't see
specific, though,
anything.
hexes in Elden Ring all seem to involve sacrifice in some way. The Staff of the Guilty talks about this. It's a heretical staff fashioned from a smouldering, withered sapling with a little creature impaled on the end. The creature is a sacrifice that has had its blood turned into red glintstone, and the staff says that this process of sacrifice is similar to hex magic.
Backing up for just a second, so that description of the sacrificial twig or whatever it was, folks, goldfish memory, don't come at me. That like these item descriptions are very, very small, but so rich and condensed in detail. I would love to see English professors, English teachers, at all ages, really cater to more of the interests of their students. So, for example, like if I have to write Shakespearean stuff, folks, I'm getting bored. Like Shakespeare did great job. I love Shakespeare's work. I enjoy much of it in its original text, which is harder to read. 2000, from 600 years later. That's not right. The Globe was 1845, 600 years later. Shut up, Mango. I'm thinking about like Romeo and Juliet, and I'm getting all distracted. I finished my coffee, and I don't have any excuse for that. Feel free to come at me in the comments below. That one's embarrassing. But the point is to give people something to write that includes a passion. Like, for example, so if you are working on writing, if you're in university, or if you just like writing, try writing item descriptions for these items. Like, pick your favorite item in the game. You can look at the item description as it is. You can not look at it. Write an item description for it. And think about how impactful the words you are using are to describe what's happening. And ideally, to have someone who reads it go, now I have a new question about that. Most of these item descriptions, they are always doing two things. One, they are giving you real factual information, whether that's going to be used from a archaeology perspective to dig up all this lore or not, they are correct. And the second is they are almost begging you to have a follow-up question about what is going on, which, described in here, you're like, wait, but if that's true, what then this? And that is powerful, provocative writing. And I know that's not necessarily related. It's not necessarily related. It's not at all related to the nature of the Elden Lore video we're watching right now. But a lot of the Elden Ring item descriptions are so good because of their ability to capture this idea of now I have another question. And that's why we get stuck in these rabbit holes. I get stuck in these rabbit holes because I always have more questions. Part of that is, the way Vaati tells these stories is really, really effective. And part of it is the game is just so damned compelling on its own that I have more questions. But I used to do creative writing, and I wish I had thought of doing something much more concise like this, and that's why I brought it up.
This sacrificial process might also explain why hexes manifest as rancorous spirits. If you were being sacrificed, I imagine that would put you in a pretty vengeful mood after death. But with the age of...
I know after I'm ritualistically sacrificed, I'm not feeling tranquil. I'm not feeling calm. I feel the rage of 1,000 scorned Latinas.
The Erdtree usurping so many prior cultures of death, it seems hexes haven't been seen in the world of Elden Ring for quite some time. For instance, do you recall fighting Necromancer Garrus? He's this sage who fights you in this cave at the base of Mount Gelmir. Garrus is described as a heretical sage, and his heresy is clearly that he's researching death rituals that run counter to those of the Erdtree. One of Garrus's achievements is the Rancor sorcery. Once thought lost, this ancient death hex was rediscovered by the necromancer Garrus.
I don't love the skeletal snake in the skull, folks. That ain't right.
Incidentally, his little snail buddies in this fight are actually snakes, who are merely wearing skulls as their shell. They're similar to the spirit caller snails, who are also snakes that are able to summon spirits. I don't think it's a coincidence that all of these snakes are so death-themed. I think the Great Serpent and its kin were a big part of the sacrificial culture that existed in Mount Gelmir.
Did you see that little hop?
Were a big part of the sacrificial culture that existed in Mount Gelmir long ago. And I don't think it's a coincidence either that Garrus rediscovered an ancient death hex so close to Mount Gelmir, especially since Rykard himself would go on to rediscover.
Folks, it took me... I spent a number of attempts on Rykard. I don't think I ever noticed he had feet. I never noticed these creepy, skinny-ass legs. Huh. Ugh.
Ancient hexes at Mount Gelmir as well. As a child of Renala, Rykard clearly had a knack for sorceries, and he developed many from the magma of Mount Gelmir.
Oh, that's a really cool
The
one.
magma shot sorcery reads, after discovering the ancient hexes of Gelmir, Rykard, son of Queen Renala, brought them back into practical use.
I think one of the things I struggle with Elden Ring magic is I love D&D, I love XCOM, I love games where you can enjoy all this tactics and this mastery. And a lot of the spells in Elden Ring, the problem is how quickly you can set them up, you can transition, your ability to aim them knowing opponents are moving. And so while yes, spells are completely perfectly viable, I'm not saying they're not, what I am expecting out of spells, I'm not really able to achieve because of how many I want to use to layer and, and strategically set up what I'm doing. Think more from the D&D wizard perspective, like put the mage armor on, lay grease out to slow down enemies and slip and trip them, light a fireball on it and blow it. Like it's this chained series of strategy and tactics. And you can't really achieve it. So this delayed magma shot makes me think of that, because that basically only works on enemies who haven't seen you yet. And there's a lot of spells I feel like that, where it's like they work in a real niche situation, but you need 6,000 spells then for every situation. It starts to kind of feel like a chore. I mean, why have 6,000 spells when can have one bonk stick? Or, if you're really good, 2 bonk stick.
As new forms of sorcery. In this sense, magma sorceries are kind of a type of hex magic. The volcano is the great serpent's home, magma is its aspect, so maybe lava sorceries, being a type of hex magic, has something to do with all of the sacrifices that had been made to the serpent god here. So we've established that magma is an aspect of the serpent, and so were hexes, but there's a third aspect, poison. The man-serpents inflicted, as does the coil shield, the serpent bone blade, and the serpent bow and arrows. Plus, of course...
What? Look, the serpent coil shield is crazy but fascinating. That would actually make an amazing D&D item.
The serpent bone blade and
cool.
The serpent bow and...
What? I don't think I got that. For the record, folks, I've never shot a bow in Elden Ring. Like, I've experimented with magic. I have occasionally tried something other than a bonk stick. But bow is... it just seems like a coward's weapon. Folks, for legal reasons, I should remind all of you that this is hyperbole. I am joking. Don't come at me in the comments, bows are really good and he just doesn't understand. It's a joke. Goose fraba.
Arrows. Plus, of course, the god-devouring serpent itself spits a great deal of poison at you during its boss fight. Considering this, I wonder if Mount Gelmir is somehow the source of the poison that has pooled at the shaded castle. Now, you could argue that this poison here is different, and that this is more of a poison that's born of stagnant, unmoving water. But I don't think that's the case. I think there's a couple of things that suggest this poisoned water comes from Mount Gelmir, perhaps even from the Great Serpent itself. To start, there's actually a link between the Mirai and the serpent that I don't think many people know about. The cut description of the serpent arrow reads, "Arrow carved to resemble a slender serpent, its fangs adorned with a fast-acting venom. These arrows were used by the people of the Shaded Castle, making them all the more hated by their enemies." The serpent bow then elaborates, stating that it was used by heretical assassins, and then the release version of the serpent bow specifies that these assassins were known as the Formless Serpents, with a bow that supernaturally infuses any arrow with poison. So yeah, there was once a lot of overlap between the Mirai and the serpent. I looked up this cut description to see if anyone else had commented on this connection, and I stumbled upon some comments by Reddit user Nah McGrath, who had made some excellent observations about how serpent worship might have influenced the culture of the Mirai family. I'll leave a link to their ideas in the description, but basically they argue the Morai might have been a part of the sacrificial execution rituals that we know took place at Mount Gelmir in the ancient past, since the Morai culture in the current age also involves execution as a family tradition, a tradition that was eventually put to use on behalf of Leyndell. And to add some more support of my own...
So I agree with the connection that the Morai have probably historically always known about the serpent. Volcano Manor certainly has known about it since it's, centered on it. And whether they were vassals the whole time or only vassals recently, I still think that, supports that as well. I don't know that connects the poison pool there per se.
To this theory, the sacrificial blade, once used for offerings to the serpent, is a weapon that's meant to be wielded by humans, so it would make sense that humans, maybe the Morai clan, might have once been in charge of such sacrificial executions. Again, all of this is cut content, but I think it might give us a valuable insight into what the devs were thinking when they designed the Morai family. Anyway, to bring things back around to my original point, I think all of this is at the very least decent proof that the poison in this environment evokes the Great Serpent, and I think it's decent proof that this poison probably flows from Mount Gelmir, which is the Great Serpent's home.
I have to disagree with that, not because I don't think the conclusion is possible, but I would not use the word proof. I think for me to think there's enough proof there, I need to see an actual venting tunnel that you could follow. Think in the DLC, there's the waterfalls that chain down throughout the land and get low, and just cover a lot of areas. But now imagine there was a river of poison that you could actually follow out, and eventually you can't follow it up into the mountain more. It can dead end for whatever reason, but you can see that it goes higher in the waterfall or whatever. But also, snakes don't leak venom. They don't leak poison. The snake spits poison, but it's not like it's pissing poison into rivers of poison. And don't get me wrong, it's an immortal, deity serpent. It could, when you so D&D is I reference that a lot because it has very intentional crafting of its lore, so it's a good baseline for comparison. It's not the end-all be-all source, but it's good to say, well, if they've done it, there is a foundation for it. There's precedence. And one of the things they do is with ancient dragons are so powerful and so in touch with the arcane weave that they literally change the weather around them. So within 5 to 10 miles of an ancient dragon's lair, they're if it's a white dragon, which are known for ice, it's a perpetual snowstorm around their lair, which is a huge, advantage for them because it's no issue for them to navigate. But if you've ever been in a snowstorm, that shit sucks. And ancient red dragons, it's, volcanoes. Ancient green dragons, can be swamps and morass, things like that. The huge forests. It can vary by dragon. So the point is, if you've got an immortal deal like this, of course it could change the terrain. But one pool of poisoned water 2 miles away, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially in comparison to the volcanic nature of everything around it. That makes good sense as the source. So I don't feel like that makes sense to me. I agree the Morai are very clearly deeply connected to the serpent god, but the poison part doesn't make sense to me yet. At least certainly not as proof.
This brings us to Seethwater Cave, brimming with poison, with a name that implies poisoned water is seething and flowing underground. It's located here on the northeastern side of Mount Gelmir, and the most curious thing about this cave, I think, is that it's located directly...
Yeah, there's a lacerated, there's an ulcerated tree spirit right there, normally. I don't think I went into this cave. But this cave, if there's poison in it, is literally what I was saying we needed. So I don't know if he's still connecting this here.
Below a minor Erdtree. And this minor Erdtree is dead. So I'd like to propose a bit of a theory. I think this tree might be dead, at least partly because of the poison at its roots. I think the Volcano Manor wanted this tree dead, and I think that this desecration of an Erdtree was the catalyst for the terrible war that would come to this region. So let me expand on that a little bit. First, what are the minor Erdtrees? Well, it seems they only came to exist after the Shattering. This is explained by the Golden Seed description.
I was just going to say, this will be explained by the Golden Seed. I feel like the Golden Seed comes up in almost every one of these videos, and I think 99.9% of the time it is relevant to kind of like set that background, but it does become a little funny that it's just, let's talk about the Golden Seed.
Which reads, when the Elden Ring was shattered, these seeds flew from the Erdtree, scattering across the various lands as if life itself knew its end had come. The seed talismans go on to say that the Erdtree was once perfect and eternal, and thus it was believed that Erdtree seeds could not exist. But exist they did, eventually growing into minor Erdtrees that spread the ailing tree's influence farther across the lands between. And at the feet of minor Erdtrees, basins were set up in order to collect their crystallized tears, which physic chemists would then use to brew powerful concoctions. And these minor Erdtrees, these offspring of the Erdtree, were defended by the Erdtree avatars and the Erdtree guardians. The avatars seem born of the tree itself and wield a ceremonial staff that depicts the Erdtree in its historic radiance. They were determined to protect the withering Erdtree's offspring in the wake of the Elden Ring's shattering. The guardians, too, are clearly part tree, although their tree-like aspect seems like it has blossomed over time instead. These were probably humans originally, and their weapon says that they are known as experts in the art of combat. At some point, though, they made what is now an ancient pact with the Erdtree, whereupon their deaths would lead not to destruction, but instead to renewed, eternal lives as guardians. The description asserts that it is said that the blood-red flowers blooming on their backs mark the senescence, or deterioration, of that ancient pact. And I think that's a sly reference to how the Erdtree isn't really eternal, and thus neither was their ancient pact. Incidentally, these guardians are perhaps proof that the Erdtree is so capable of rebirth, something the community has long speculated about, based on some murals found in-game. And I say that they're proof of rebirth since their weapon description makes it clear that they had to die before they could be renewed as eternal minor Erdtree guardians. But of all the minor Erdtrees to be renewed to guard, I wouldn't have wanted to guard the one at Mount Gelmir. This one was growing right next to a faction that was becoming increasingly defined by their resistance to the Erdtree. And while fear of repercussion might have protected this minor Erdtree for a time, eventually its time ran out, and the Erdtree was desecrated and killed. Now, it might be a stretch to say that this minor Erdtree was poisoned intentionally, or even unintentionally, by the poison at its roots in Seethwater Cave, but there are Lanedale Knights and Scouts who have ventured into Seethwater Cave, and while they could just be sheltering here, I like to think they're here to investigate how the minor Erdtree died. Though I should be clear, this is largely my own headcanon. You can speculate on a few ways this minor Erdtree might have died. For example, maybe Rykard used the traces of the Rune of Death to bring down this Erdtree, since it's the unleashing of the Rune of Death that burns the actual Erdtree later in our timeline, so why not use a minor piece of destined death to burn a minor Erdtree? Whatever the case, this minor Erdtree is dead, and all around it we find the aftermath of a horrific battle. So
are we sure that this is the aftermath of a horrific battle and not like an aggressive new form of Pilates? Because look, I've seen plenty of people doing Pilates hanging upside down, and if this was a big group class, I don't think it's possible the instructor just couldn't get them down and they wasted away up there. I just think we shouldn't run away, you know? Let's just not like run away with conclusions here.
Considering fire and burning an Erdtree would be a cardinal sin, I feel pretty convinced that the death of this minor Erdtree might have been the catalyst.
How come everything's like cardinal sin this, cardinal sin that? How come we don't have any Blue Jay sins? Huh. It's interesting. My retention for this video sharply decreased at the hour 14-minute mark. I can't figure out why.
For this, what Gideon calls the most appalling battle in the history of the Shattering. Now, Leyndell is all about defense, right? And there's evidence that it has successfully weathered many assaults.
Leyndell is all about defense. Except for that time a giant dragon ravaged the city. Which, to be fair, they did defeat the dragon, but it kind of...
upon its walls. It is said that the soldiers of Leyndell fight their battles defensively, and their purpose is to protect that which deserves protection, and thus the shield always comes before the sword. The one exception to that, it seems, was the assault on Volcano Manor. Here, Leyndell actually launched an offensive. There are numbered sites of grace at Gelmir, called First Mount Gelmir Campsite, located here, and then there's 9th Mount Gelmir Campsite, located here.
I think I made an Expedition 33 joke when we were exploring this, because I was like, this is like an expedition going out.
And the fact that there were so many campsites clearly, I think, suggests a sort of slow progression in their campaign to assault Mount Gelmir. But the battle itself clearly took place here, leading up to the minor Erdtree, where there are mountains of the dead and the bodies of crucified giants and other folk. It's a pretty grim scene. The only note of brevity comes from the jar cannon, an
I liked the jar cannon.
Experimental firearm brought to the assault on Volcano Manor, where it was discovered that no one knew how to use it. While that's kind of funny,
it took me way too long to figure out how to use the damn thing.
The aftermath isn't. The dead are piled and rotting, and have been for quite a while. Bodies are even seen on both sides of a broken bridge here, and assuming they didn't just throw half the bodies off this broken bridge for some reason, I feel like another logical conclusion to draw is that the war occurred so long ago and the bodies have been here for so long that a land upheaval broke the bridge in two and separated it with the bodies still upon it. We do learn from the Gelmir map that the land in this area has experienced such an upheaval, but please let me know if I'm missing something here. So
it certainly looks that way, because the way the bridge is broken, like it's not like, the bridge is this, but now it's this because this middle section caved in. The bridge was this, and now it's this, which is tectonic shifting, resulting in half of the land shifting down, causing this disconnect for the bridge, because it's not just this big gap. So, like, to me, clearly, and especially with the ups and downs of the whole Mount Gelmir area, which again goes back to my point on you built a manor on a volcano and you wonder why half of it's under lava. Unbelievable.
Basically, all of the living that fought on Rykard's side are dead and gone. But what about those who fought on his side but were never alive? These are the marionette soldiers, and they're commonly employed by sorcerers, so these soldiers likely belonged to Rykard, considering his heritage as Renala's son. And they're the only ones that really fight on here now, since they're puppets. They're uncaring of their master's blasphemy or the state of the battlefield. A nearby sword gravestone comments on the battle. The assault on Volcano Manor, the squalid, the sick, the blasphemous, a wretched, unending war with no glory. The fact that the assault on Volcano Manor involved the squalid and the sick makes me think again of the serpent's poison. Human defenders of the manor in the current age do attack with poison pots, so it's not ridiculous to think that some sort of chemical warfare might have been used against the House of the Erdtree in this wretched, unending war. Speaking of which, the nearby grace references the nearby Road of Iniquity. Iniquity is a word that means immoral or grossly unfair behavior, and I think we experience the aftermath of that iniquity firsthand when we encounter this troll warrior. It's hard to say for sure which side this troll fought on, but I lean towards it fighting on Rykard's side since it's flanked by marionette soldiers. Whatever the case though, this troll warrior has seen some shit, and now it has eyes that burn with the flames of frenzy. Frenzy, as you might know from our Age of Despair video, is contagious, but it also commonly visits those who have simply experienced some sort of horror or despair. So it is with the troll here, and with many of the Lanedale Knights as well, who you find despairing around Mount Gelmir. A bunch of Lanedale Knights can even be found cannibalizing their comrades, adding to the horror of this stage. So it's no wonder then that the land itself has even become afflicted, and Eyes of Yellow, which grow in lands afflicted by frenzy, have started to flourish in this place. A spirit once allied with Rykard muses on the squalor of this battlefield.
Lord Rykard, if this putrid field of death is what your blasphemy would bring, then I can no longer abide. No one can.
I think this dialogue helps to sell the idea that morale was fading during the war, even amongst Rykard's faithful.
War fatigue.
Things would only get worse, as Rykard was about to feed him.
Sorry, folks. Middle of the screen. There it is again. That disconnect. That's gonna bother me so much. Like, it's so I want to be clear when I say it bothers me so much. It's like the pattern in my head is like it's wrong. I'm not judging the game. I don't give a shit. Like, I'm not docking the game for this or anything. Like, people misunderstand like my observations as complaints. That's not the same thing. I observe it because my brain wants to see everything in its, neat rows. It's one of the reasons I enjoy simulator games, because I'm like, ooh, like I'm tidying shelves. Look, he's like, this is what I imagine the supermarket should look like. It's an autistic as fuck thing to do. So this is not a complaint, but it is going to bother me. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but if someone knows if this is actually the game assets or maybe just the way Vaati's team is visualizing it, I'd love to know, because I'm genuinely just curious at this point. Because when I do my New Game Plus, I'm going to have to go looking for this, because I got to be like, look, it's the thing!
Himself to the Great Serpent. And perhaps I should clarify, at the time of the war, I don't think Rykard had yet fed himself to the serpent. This is mostly because
I was literally going to ask, like, when is this happening? Because that's going to be chapter 3, I'm sure, is just the full details on that.
Of Tanith. Tanith wears the consort's robe,
Yep.
which reads, "Long ago, when Rykard first set eyes on Tanith, she was working as a dancer in a foreign land. Soon, he made her his consort."
Story is old as time, to be honest. When I first met Mango Wife, she was a dancer, and I was like, no, now you're my wife. And she was like, great. And then I swept her off her feet, carried her back to the boat, and we set sail for distant lands to the west.
The description then goes on to state, she was the only human to remain by his side when he became the Serpent of Blasphemy.
She does seem weirdly into it.
Since Rykard supposedly had no more humans at his side when he became the Serpent, the war must have taken place before this transition, since he obviously still had humans at his side.
These things, these fiery volcano shooters, so these are at Raya Lucaria outside, like they're laying siege to the area. And I think there's also 2 of these outside of the fort to the southwest in Caelid, Fort Gale. They're right next to the Flame Grant Me Strength, or one of the spells I picked up. Maybe it was Flame Cleanse Me. I've never understood whose these are, because presumably one side invented these and runs these. They kind of show up everywhere, and I don't know if they're Rykards, Raya Lucarias, though they don't seem defensively positioned at Raya Lucaria. They seem like they're invading forces. The way forces are split in the world of Lands Between are often very confusing to me.
This transition, since he obviously still had humans at his side when he was fighting in the war. That said, you definitely could still argue that Rykard had already fed himself to the Serpent by the time of this war, and that's because of these tattered flags that fly over the battlefield. The symbol shows a depiction of Rykard and the Great Serpent.
I mean, that's super sus, but that can be an idea long before it's happened, but that is... I mean, because so presumably he's known about the serpent forever, and this type of symbology could exist long before he's actually been like, oh, let's just make it literal. But it is suggestive.
Not to mention, Giza, his inquisitor, had a weapon decorated with serpent symbolism.
Nah, but again, Giza is Mirai, and Mirai are deeply connected to the serpents, so that doesn't necessarily...
So yeah, as it stands, I probably lean towards Rykard not having fed himself to the serpent yet. I think maybe he was just enraptured with it, or maybe this serpent symbolism on the banner and in Giza's weapon just showed up later in the timeline, closer to when we explore. But it's hard to say for sure. And if you guys know the answer to this, feel free to let me know in the comments. Whatever the case, I do think this assault from Leyndell was the beginning of the end. And I think the final straw was when Rykard doubled down and fed himself to the serpent, great rune and all. It was in this moment that Tanith was truly charmed by him.
Deeply fucked. Chapter 3. Rykard.
We know that Rykard delved into Mount Gelmir.
There's another one, folks. There's another one. These have got to be in-game assets.
And came out.
Never mind, it's fine. Maybe it's a rendering distance.
With new.
Look at that. There's that extra hook there that does the rest of the connection. No, that's been missing on another one, so it isn't just rendering distance. Still, little things. Nah, I'm just curious. Again, this is not a complaint, folks.
New death hex sorceries, but he must have uncovered a lot more within. Legends of an ancient culture of sacrifice and a serpent god that could not die. But why did Rykard feed himself to such a creature? Well, for one, it's certainly possible that losses from the assault from Leyndell factored into things. With his troops pushed to the brink, the serpent might have represented a new promising path forward. But that's just speculation. In terms of...
So historically... both historically and more importantly, I think through fantasy, history. Like even think about Palpatine in Star Wars. Palpatine orchestrated the war, not because wars are fun. He orchestrated the war because under times of strife like that, people want singular leaders. They want confidence. And so he orchestrated the war to catapult himself into power, to create a situation so complex that people felt the need to give more power. And so you think about, Rykard feeding himself to the serpent as this war going, and I'm not saying anyone orchestrated this war, though potentially America, but the worse things get, the more suddenly they're like, this crazy thing might be the only way. And you will see that a lot throughout anime, fantasy, everything. When people become very desperate, options they normally would never consider become feasible options. And so in my mind, with what we've seen and heard so far, Rykard's known this power was here. He's going to reshape the world. Until he got pushed to the brink, I don't think he was thinking of feeding himself to the serpent. But once things got, really difficult, he's like, fuck, I know where there's more power. And I have conviction. I am committed to this path I have chosen. If I must reach for this extra power to do it, I will do it. And I think that's very in character for him.
Concrete proof, we have the remembrance of the blasphemous, which makes it very clear that Rykard took the form of a giant serpent that he might devour, grow, and live eternally. Rykard is then quoted as saying, "I understand. The road of blasphemy is long and perilous. One cannot walk it unprepared to sin."
Yeah.
In the concept art for this scene, the so-called giant serpent consuming Rykard is actually pretty small, looking nowhere near as vast as the great serpent that we fight in-game. But if this actually is the great serpent, well, it might make some sense that it would be this small in this scene. The serpent hunter seems to suggest the great serpent was actually defeated in the past, so maybe it was eventually reborn as a smaller creature or diminished in size, and it's only now after consuming Rykard that it's able to begin growing back to its former glory. The details in this...
So by the way, these other two eggs, they make their way over to Sekiro. This is Steve, now one-eyed snake, and then this is Frankie, a snake with two heads. So just, fun little Sekiro for you.
Scene are amazing. If you look closely, you realize that Rykard literally served himself up on a golden platter to the snake. Off to the side, there are even a couple of what look like small eggs on a silver platter, and only one of them has hatched. So, did the great serpent hatch from this egg? What about the other eggs? I don't really know what to make of this, but again, this scene is concept art, essentially, so maybe I shouldn't be taking it too literally. We also learn from the Devourer's scepter that in his final moments, Rykard briefly saw a vision of the future, the shape of a serpent devouring the world. A vision of the future.
Now that snake with the orb in its mouth looks exactly like Mesmer's snake.
This reminds me a lot of a description from Dark Souls 3 that a lot of you might remember, where another god-devouring being called Aldrich also saw a vision of the future, except where Rykard foresaw a serpent devouring the world, Aldrich foresaw the coming age of the deep sea.
The fuck is
the question is, can we trust either of these visions as legitimate visions of the future? Or are they more like visions of what may or may not come to pass? It's hard to say, but given enough time in these universes, I suppose it's impossible to rule out that these things would never happen. Also, both of these visions are worded ambiguously enough that even if Rykard or Aldrich were to die, their visions could still come to pass. And in Rykard's case, after all,
I servant never die.
Together.
To Rykard's knights, this blasphemy with the serpent was one step too far.
Someone please kill him. That horrendous serpent.
I remember this
Praetor Rykard. You're tarnished. Here to put the demigods to the sword. Then please, kill the great serpent.
Praetor Rykard's ambitions,
Though blasphemous,
marked him a worthy sovereign.
but they were reduced to gluttonous depravity once he gave himself to the serpent. Whatever that thing is, it is no longer Praetor Rykard. Someone must kill him to spare him and his ambitions from further dishonor.
This is the armor of the Gelmir Knights. It bears an emblem that none wear any longer, standing as it does for a lord that fell from loft ambition into gluttonous depravity. Indeed, there are no living Gelmir Knights left in game, and as the lord lost his dignity, so too did these knights lose their master. This is the Serpent Hunter, a weapon that serves as both greatsword and spear. Thought to have been used to hunt an immortal great serpent in the distant past, it manifests a long blade of light when facing such a creature. When their master's heroic aspirations degenerated into mere greed, his men searched for a weapon with which they might halt their lord. The fact this weapon exists obviously suggests the great serpent had enemies that wanted to kill it in the past. I guess sacrificing everything around you might do that. Curiously, the weapon uses a type of white light power that I don't think manifests anywhere else in Elden Ring, and I wish we knew more about whatever enemy of the great serpent.
So I remember loving this fight because I thought mechanically this was really cool. This was really interesting. And I also remember thinking, there is nothing like this anywhere else. What's the deal here? And I'm trying to think, I'm trying to compare Rykard to other bosses to be like, should we have come up with some unique weapon? And I don't know that there's any obvious answer to me for that, since obviously every other boss was, you know, beatable with the conventional means we had available to us, aka the bonk sticks. But I feel like this boss was so cool, and maybe one or two more like this could have been really interesting. You know, maybe, I don't know, because who even made this? Hugh?
Created this weapon long ago. Regardless, this was the perfect weapon for the Gelmir Knights to find, so they heroically tried to use it against Rykard and failed.
I left the serpent-slaying spear in the Lord's chamber.
That I do not remember, because that just... I swear I talked to this guy. I don't remember the perfect weapon is right there. I remember fighting Rykard with my bonk sticks going like, nope, that's a bad life choice. And then, you know, I had just picked up the spear, so I was like, so maybe the spear, you know, is fine. And then, of course, it starts its glowing, crazy, long-distance beam, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. And then I went and upgraded it.
Worthy Tarnished. Brandish the spear and run him through. The great serpent. That unspeakable monstrosity.
In a way, these knights were still loyal to Rykard, or the memory of him, at least. They wanted to kill Rykard to spare him and his ambitions from dishonor, but Rykard was simply remaining loyal to his ideals, if you think about it, even if he had to abandon his dignity to go down this path. The serpent takes, bolstering itself with the strength of others, and to Rykard this was just an extension of his current practice, as taking by force became the rule when he had turned to heresy long ago. He believed that the gods were no different, and there might be more truth to that than we know. Look at the Erdtree, assimilating the dead to feed itself, for example. Or look at Godric using an ancient ritual of grafting to bolster his own strength. All things can be conjoined, indeed. But,
folks, I don't know the correct number of rings. I'm not an expert in jewelry. I'm not an expert in bedazzling oneself. I do, however, know this is too much. This is too many rings, objectively. Just what? Like, half of them, I don't even know how they're staying on, which is kind of impressive, to be honest.
While Rykard kept his will and remained loyal to his ideals, his forces signed up to usurp the Order, not really to become worse than it. And so Rykard lost the favor with the majority of his forces. But speaking of his forces, the marionettes actually weren't the only automatons who fought on, incapable of death or despair. Rykard also had the Iron Virgins. Also known as abductor virgins, these undying iron monstrosities have a lot going on with their designs. For one, they each cradle a baby, which is some fascinating symbolism that I hope might be explained.
Yeah, I mean, if they're called virgins, which, first of all, why? But why do they have a baby? Did they kidnap a baby?
In the DLC, but it's what's on the inside that counts here. And I'm not talking about the strips of meat on the inside, which keep their victims nice and cozy. I'm talking about the snakes. If you look closely inside these creatures, you'll realize that the snakes are actually wrapped around a sort of central mechanism. Thus, I think these abductors are likely piloted by snakes.
I never noticed that. That is horrifying. Like, I know they I never realized it was snakes grabbing you, and that's like snakes everywhere.
The insides and the snakes even take extra damage when hit, which is a bit more evidence for the snakes being the most important part of the machine. The fact that snakes appear here seems to suggest that these machines were created after the shattering and after Rykard took on the serpent as his aspect, so...
I mean, I'm still not convinced it's after he took it on as the aspect. Well, took it on as the aspect, is he using that synonymously with let the snake devour himself? That's not clear to me. Also, after the snake devoured him and he's in that pit, like, how does he commune? Is it exclusively through Tanith's will? So, like, Tanith administrates everything? And because it seems like he never really leaves that chamber. So what's that power really doing for him if he never leaves? That's another open question.
That's why I only mention these at this latter point in the video, as I'm trying to present things in order with the timeline, and I think these entities showed up later in that timeline. Clearly, Rykard was still keeping up his habit of abducting people, and now it was the snakes who fulfilled that role, spiriting their victims away, not unlike the snakes of Dark Souls and Sekiro. Interestingly, the
Abductor Virgin, Spirited Away, mix when, you know? When are we going to do that crossover?
texture of these snakes is quite metallic, almost as if they're inorganic, animated creatures. And when it comes to snakes having a metallic appearance, there actually is quite a lot of precedence for that phenomenon in Elden Ring. The Coil Shield, for example, is a bronze snake that becomes animated, to the point where it's able to bite and still inflict poison upon enemies. The Gravekeepers, too, wear armbands that are embellished with bronze snakes, and there are some Gravekeepers whose bronze snakes briefly actually come to life in a grab attack. So yeah, there's definitely something going on with bronze snakes in particular. Incidentally, these Gravekeepers have lore that explains that the snake has become a hated symbol in the lands between. The Gravekeepers were actually once gladiators who were driven from the Colosseum, and their cloak reads, "The snake is viewed as a traitor to the Erdtree," and the audience delighted in seeing these bronze effigies beaten and battered in gladiatorial combat. Now, at first you'd think that the snake is viewed as a traitor to the Erdtree thanks to Rykard. However, I'm not too sure if that works with the timeline of Elden Ring. Rykard was only consumed by the serpent after the shattering, and the arenas where the gladiators would have fought were used primarily in the age of Lord Godfrey, and the practice was said to have died out by the age of King Consort Radagon. So, if audiences were delighting in seeing the symbol of a snake being beaten and battered, you'd think that would have occurred in Godfrey's age then, which was long before Rykard. Therefore,
when was the previous immortal snake defeated? Because it'd be kind of funny if snakes were hated because of the immortal snake incarnation before Rykard, and then, you know, after the shattering, Rykard's like, yeah, let's do this again.
The snake must have already had an ill reputation in the lands between. This is where Mesmer comes in. So the DLC is not yet out as of the making of this video, but the recent trailer seems to suggest that Mesmer and his serpentine aspect has existed from very early on in the timeline. And since Mesmer as a character has clearly done something worthy of being sealed away in the Land of Shadow, I wonder what could he have done?
See, we now know from the DLC that that's not what's driving this.
Did he assault the Erdtree, perhaps? Did this event have anything to do with the Great Serpent, or even the serpent-slaying greatsword, maybe? Could it have something to do with the Giant's Forge, which has snakes on its design, and a fire that can burn down the Erdtree? Or could Mesmer have once attempted to burn down the Erdtree with his own flames? So many questions, and I think we should all go into the DLC looking for answers to questions like these. At any rate, the Abductor Virgins certainly aren't doing the snake's reputation any favors in this modern age. Their iconic weapon is this, the same wheel as Inquisitor Giza's signature weapon, which was adopted for use by the Iron Virgins. Therefore, I wouldn't be surprised if Giza invented them. Our only other source of information on the abductors comes from patches.
You're making your way to the Erdtree, no? Well, I heard something that might help.
Don't care. Stab him.
A special means of reaching your destination. Have you ever seen an Iron Virgin? The clunky contraptions are whirlwinds of sickles and spiked wheels. But long ago, they were endowed with a spell of transposition. And get this, a surviving virgin sits at the bottom of the big water wheel in the Academy of Rhea Lucaria. Its transpositional powers fully intact. So right, if you get caught in it on purpose, it'll chuck you out straight at the base of the Erdtree, Or so I'm told.
People have told me about that, but that I had no idea.
This
that was
explains why
patches.
this abductor in particular is still capable of transporting you while the others can't.
Yeah.
Their abduction powers are a spell. It might have even been Rykard who cast it. You'd think a son of Renala would be capable of casting an enchantment that could last all this time. This one intact abduction spell takes victims to a subterranean inquisition chamber, where they could be interrogated. Rykard's abductions clearly adapted to include these war machines. Obviously, after making an enemy of Leyndell, he couldn't just invite nobles to the Volcano Manor for interrogation anymore. The world has become hostile to him now, and for a time after the Shattering, I imagine these machines were probably a very important way of getting intel about the state of the world from widely across the lands between. And these machines are found widely across the lands between. They're endlessly fighting and endlessly attempting to abduct, even though their teleportation enchantments are long faded away. There's a couple of interesting machines. One in Gelmir is missing a head and has a more wild attack pattern. It's become a part of a demi-human ambush here. Maybe they beheaded it so that they could better use it to their advantage? That same sort of thing seems to have happened to this one in the Altus Plateau as well, which is stuck at the bottom of a cave. Here, the Volga militia have weaponized it, and it's clearly defeated many intruders within this death pit. Incidentally, that's also what's happened to the one in Raya Lucaria. It can't get out of this hole, and apparently that's the best way to deal with these machines. When you explore the subterranean interrogation chamber that this abductor takes you to, you realize that no torturers are left here. The need for that seems to have long faded, along with the teleportation spells on the abductors. Somewhat ironically, these days it seems that the Albinorics, now driven to insanity, have become the only remaining line of defense in this place. Some even still wear the black dumpling, which is a
The what?
mask forced on a victim's head to lend torture an extra degree of cruelty. It magnifies one's fears and makes them acutely aware of all forms of pain. I'm not sure why
Well, that's less funny.
Rykard was so keen to torture Albinorics, but everyone hates Albinorics in the lands between, it seems, so I guess Rykard was no different. Indeed, torture with the Black Dumpling wasn't done to get intel. To quote the item, when the Black Dumpling goes on, the torturer no longer seeks answers, only to inflict suffering without hope of relief. And so we arrive at the state of the Volcano Manor as it stands when our character explores it, long after the Shattering. It's now a place crawling with grotesque creatures, and chief among them are the man-serpents.
Don't love those. That ain't right.
Chapter 4. The Serpents of the Volcano.
As the name implies, the man-serpents were born of man and serpent, but what human would copulate with another species?
Yeah.
At first glance, you might think that they might have been born of a union between Tanith and Rykard. Rykard had become one with the snake at this late point in our timeline,
Don't like
and
that.
Tanith was utterly devoted to him, to the point where Rykard actually offered Tanith a tonic of forgetfulness to wipe her memories of him, but she refused, saying, "My lord, there could be no greater distress than to forget you." So Rykard clearly cared enough about her well-being to the point where he wanted her to forget what he had become, and Tanith was so charmed by him that she refused. However, despite this dedication to each other, Tanith would not become the mother of the man-serpents. Maybe that was another trauma that Rykard did not want to subject her to.
I will never be a good mother. My heart is too frail. Our Lord must have known this all along. My meekness is all too clear.
Let's learn more about Tanith. We've learned from the consort's robe that Rykard met Tanith when she was working as a dancer in a foreign land. We learn more about her talents from her dancers' castanets, which are these small instruments that some dancers clap together in their hands as they perform. Taniths reveal that her passionate dance comprises no seductiveness, but merely a dignified beauty. And I think they're making a point of Tanith's lack of seductiveness for a reason. After her meeting with Rykard, she became his consort, yes, but I don't think that Rykard wanted to have children with her.
Lady Tanith is my mother. I am told I was born by the grace of a glorious king, that my mother cherishes this form I inhabit.
The origins of the man-serpents
Yeah.
are explored more deeply when we meet Raya, who is a scout for the Volcano Manor who quickly reveals herself as Zorias, a man-serpent who is starting to question her birthright. In the end, Zorias comes to the conclusion that she was not
Oh, that walk by. That's some Jurassic Park shit right there.
born by the grace of a great king. Rather, she was born in some repellent birthing ritual. And
Yeah.
what's more, the Lady Tanith isn't her true mother.
Shocker. Give service.
Funny,
I think I had
isn't
that.
it? I am certain of it. I was born inside this. It's a part of my birth, mother.
Look, I found the placenta from your birth. What?
The truth of Zorias' birth is revealed by the serpent's amnion, which reads, "Amnion from the mother's womb, which cradled the poor unwanted offspring of a repellent birthing ritual. It will never dry out, remaining damp indefinitely." Truth is, Zorias' birth mother is almost certainly this terrible woman named Daedeka. We can surmise this because of the talisman that Zorias leaves behind at the end of the questline. Its description reads, "Disturbing likeness of a woman whose skin was flayed. She smiles with a serene tenderness, increases damage taken. It is said that this woman, named Daedeka, indulged in every form of adultery and wicked pleasure imaginable, giving birth to a myriad of grotesque children." According to our translator, Loki, the Japanese word for grotesque used here is actually the same one the game uses to describe the deformed man-serpents in English. The clear implication being that this woman consented to what the serpent's amnion calls a repellent birthing ritual with a serpent giving birth to the man-serpents. The serpent she consorted with was almost certainly Rykard himself. I suggest this because in the 1.0 version of the Daedeka talisman, Daedeka was actually a soft-featured man who was one of Captain Rykard's paramours. It seems this description was eventually changed so that Daedeka's character could support the law of them giving birth to the man-serpents. Therefore, they needed to be a woman. However, I imagine the part where Daedeka was one of Rykard's lovers could conceivably still be intact. Therefore, I think it's likely that Rykard is the father of the man-serpents. Not to mention, the man-serpent spirit ashes more explicitly state that long ago the elder serpent that dwelled on Mount Gelmir devoured a demigod, and then the birth of the man-serpents followed. Also, the similar naming convention that Raya and Rykard share is another piece of evidence. And finally, the serpent amnion Raya was born from says it cradled the poor unwanted offspring. I'm told the Japanese word for unwanted could perhaps more accurately be stating that Raya is a noble's bastard child, which
Makes more
she kind of
sense.
is if
So just
Rykard is her father, since Tanith is not her birth mother. So it is that the man-serpents actually might not have been completely unwanted at all. An older version of the serpent's amnion states that there are some man-serpents with particularly intelligent offspring. And while this is cut content, it's obviously still true, not just because of Raya, but because of this guy. This bloat-headed man-serpent is presented as if they're royalty, with a lavish cloak, jeweled chest and large throne of their own. They stand here surrounded by human remains, and they're in a position of dominance over the surviving human nobles who are at the foot of the steps as well. These nobles are tormented by what is likely the serpent's poison. Clearly, man is no longer valued in this place, and the man-serpents now rule in their stead. Indeed, the man-serpents are actually closest to the waygate that takes you to Rykard, suggesting that they might speak on his behalf.
Are we not going to talk about the bloatheads? Like, what is that? They just puff sacks?
Somewhat. Speaking of which, it makes sense that a carrion, a former one at least, like Rykard, would have a waygate in their domain, but I'm getting off topic. The bloathead serpent itself casts some very advanced glintstone magics, and the Gelmir glintstone staff they wield talks about how the man-serpents draw from faith, in addition to intelligence, to enhance the potency of their sorcery. Their faith, I assume, would likely be directed at the serpent god, which once had a religion of its own, after all, and the man-serpent's intelligence that they used to cast spells would make sense as well, considering the carrion influence and maybe even heritage that they have thanks to Rykard. The staff itself even makes a lot of sense for a man-serpent to wield, as it has red glintstone at the tip as the catalyst, and red glintstone is specifically formed from the blood of sacrifices, and the serpents once had a culture of sacrifice as well. In addition to this man-serpent's mastery of sorcery, the man-serpents in general seem to have learned how to fashion weapons and shields, like the copper round shield, for example, which has been tempered in lava. And then there's also the magma blade, which was fashioned from actual lava and is considered impossible for a human to have made. Clearly these serpents have an affinity with magma, and according to the sorcery, Gelmir's fury, the arrogance of attempting to harness the fury of the volcano belongs to men and serpents alone. Speaking of serpents also, there are a few magma worms in Mount Gelmir, and they're at home here in lava of the volcano. The magma worms are explicitly former heroes who aspired to become dragons, but turned into worms instead, and their lore actually doesn't relate too much to Mount Gelmir. However, I think their lore could still be a nod towards serpents being lesser dragons. Again, serpents being lesser dragons is a From Software staple at this point. Within the Volcano Manor, we also see serpent statues, many with wings, which could be a reference to their once heavenly draconic origins. But hopefully Messmer and his draconic eye and his wings and snakes elaborate on this point in the DLC, since I feel like there's some ancient history we're missing. Speaking of ancient history, one of the biggest mysteries in all of Mount Gelmir is this place, the Temple of Igle. This place is where we loot the Serpent's Amnion, that product of a birthing ritual that Raya recognizes and was born from. This item is overshadowed, though, by this, the flayed skin and head of a serpent, which I would assume might be Igle, who the temple is named after, though that's just speculation. Another piece of speculation is that this large serpent's skin is flayed in the first place, though I think that might be explained by the presence of the Godskin noble who defends it. To sum up the Godskins lore briefly, the Godskin nobles once served a character called the Glowmide Queen, who was clearly a character who was a proponent of bringing death to the gods. And what's interesting about the Glowmide Queen is that there's some dialogue from Melina that suggests that the Glowmide Queen doesn't just care about death, but births as well. And so, what if the Serpent's Amnion, this product of new birth, might actually be what's being defended by the Godskin here? Or maybe the Godskin wants to bring death to the Serpent God? maybe this godskin, like so many other godskins in-game, is allied with blasphemous forces in order to strike back at Queen Marika. Or maybe the godskins have ties to the snake, since their necks can do this extendy thing. Maybe they were involved with the man-serpent birthing ritual. Maybe we just have no idea, because you can speculate in a ton of different directions when it comes to this place. So
crazy.
I'm gonna stop myself here until we have the DLC, just in case that brings some new information to light. I'm also going to hold off on discussing the recusants of Volcano Manor in this video, as we'd love to cover them in a more cinematic Prepare to Cry episode, and I don't really like treading the same ground twice on my channel if I can avoid it. And if you're interested in supporting my videos and seeing that Prepare to Cry video early, as well as many other...
Yeah, we've already watched the Prepare to Cry stuff. This is very interesting. So, we've answered the big questions here. Mostly. I mean, some of the timeline, Rykard's ultimate, so his role as Praetorian that eventually... and then the shattering, and then his eventual turn to the power that had sat next to him the whole time. I think that makes sense. Vaati did not say together a single time, which I will be honest, disappoints me a little bit. And beyond that, I think that really does answer most of our questions about Rykard. Or at least, the really big ones we can notably fact check. I think a lot of the questions that go beyond that, there's still always that room for supposition and thoughts. But, folks, the lore of Elden Ring is blasphemous. This video clocks in at almost an entire 2 hours. But, folks, that's because that's how long it takes to have fun. We have 3 more VaatiVidya videos, I believe. We have the Ruins. We have the Emir video, which is madness. Not madness, but the... Elden Ring lore is something. And then we have one other that I'm also blanking on. But, folks, I think we've got 3 videos left. We will finish these this week. And then we got more to do. So, Carbot Animations, we're definitely going to do a reaction video to some of that stuff. We're going to try at least one, which we'll do 4 or 5 together. We'll make a real, so we'll do it because they're only 3-minute videos or whatever. So we'll do a bunch of them, and we'll see if I can add enough value to them that it makes for good reaction. Because if it's just me chuckling while the videos do their thing, that to me feels doesn't feel fair to the artist who put them together. But we'll see. We will definitely be doing the entire Tarnished Archaeologist series, and I have decided that we'll come back to Sekiro after I finish the Elden Ring stuff that I want to do, at least the first round of Elden Ring stuff, which could be Vaati, but I do want to do Tarnished Archaeologist as well, and there are some other ones I want to do as well. So we are going to at least get through Tarnished Archaeologist and a couple of one-offs before we move on to Sekiro. But let me know. I'm going to put a poll up in the channel at some point for what type of reaction videos you want. Do you only want Elden Ring? Do you want anything from software? Do you want anything video game related? Is there another subject that you'd love to see me react to? Reaction content has been a lot of fun for me. I am enjoying it. And so if there's a niche here where there's more you all want to see, I'm interested to know. So let me know in the comments below. Have a wonderful start to your week, folks, and I will catch you all tomorrow.